Dawson City is built on a floodplain. It was inhabited perhaps for thousands of years by people known as the Trondek. They hunted and fished and lived large, at least so far as a hunting and gathering society could. Then came the gold rush stampeders at the end of the 19th century. The floodplain was totally unsuited for a European settlement, but the entrepreneurs who wanted to serve the gold rushers settled there anyway. And the Han speakers under Chief Isaac gracefully resettled 5 miles downstream. The first thing we did when we arrived in Dawson City was to seek out the Yukon Territory's free ferry across the Yukon River. Okay, we'll see if we can get on this free ferry and go over to West Dawson across the river, see some sights from there. There's no cable for this thing, it has to be steered. In fact, the Yukon carries the ferry a considerable distance downstream, and the ferry has to fight its way upstream back to the ferry landing.
This goes plenty fast, getting us across. We're going to park over here for this special art festival, but I'm looking at the gorgeous weather we have in Dawson.
Now from the other side, there's Dawson. We're looking roughly south or southeast, and down there around the corner should be where the Klondike River comes in.
Well, if it weren't for this ferry, which operates 24 hours a day, one would have to drive from Dawson all the way back to Whitehorse to get here.
How about 1,000 kilometers or maybe 800 miles just to go around and avoid the ferry, the way we go through Mayville to avoid the Stove Ferry. If you live in Dawson City, however, you've got to take the ferry if you want to go to Alaska on the top of the World Highway. Here we're on the south end of town, hiking to the confluence of the Klondike and the Yukon rivers before we turn in for the day. There's the Moose Hide Slide. Looks like industrial mining, but no, that's a natural slide. Occurred 1,700 years ago. They call it the Moose Hide Slide. And it doesn't seem that vegetation has reclaimed the face of that slide. Dawson is underlain by, we're told, 60 meters of permafrost. But the permafrost is melting to the extent that some of the buildings are beginning to lean. Furthermore, of the 7 times the ice has gone out of the rivers early in the past century, 5 of those breakups have occurred since the year 2000. So, you don't find many people in Dawson, I think, who doubt the truth of global warming. Here the houses are built up on blocks so that the warmth from the building doesn't penetrate the soil and conduct itself to the permafrost. Now coming down this valley is the Klondike River, and it flows here into the Yukon. And it looks to me that both rivers are low, so maybe we're having a very dry spring. Dry and warm. You can see here from the top of Midnight Dome how the clear Klondike water mixes with the muddy Yukon water. Walking along the levee, we came upon this oddity, a houseboat or raft moored out in the Yukon River. Except it isn't really in the middle of the Yukon River, it's in the outwash from the Klondike.
Oh, is it a houseboat? Is it a Mark Twain development out there?
We found out that this cabin in the river is owned by a kind of mountain man, or we could call him a river man, who's avoiding taxes. As long as he's out of navigation's way in the river, at that point he owes taxes to no one. This is the next day, the 20th, and we're to take a little river cruise. Here's out-of-service steamboat, not the one we're going to take today, and this mysterious derelict of a building, which may have been a bank at one time, where Robert Service was an employee. Notice the Keno here draws only 3 feet of water. Mighty shallow draft. Here's our riverboat, the Klondike Spirit. This is more like the Chautauqua Belle than the city of Jamestown. It's a replica, sort of a Walt Disney replica of a steamboat. It's a diesel-powered craft built for tourists. Well, we're underway. On the course down the river, our guide narrated some local history. She was hard to follow because the sound system was inadequate and she spoke with a French accent, but we listened intently and it picked up some interesting information, such as this about the Moosehide Village. This is the Moosehide Village, a place that has an ironic history. At first, the Moosehides, or the Klondike Huichins, lived on the Dawson town site. But when the gold dredging began in good earnest and the Europeans, mostly Americans, moved in droves, the Klondike Huichins retreated to this place about 5 miles downriver. At this site, they ran their own schools, spoke their own language, maintained their own culture until the lure of work at the mines drew them back to Dawson, and one by one they abandoned their village. Finally, there was almost no one left in the village, and now, a century later, the Han people are rediscovering their heritage, and they've discovered that their town site is valuable real estate for the exclusive use of the Klondike Huichin. From ghetto to resort. You may have noticed I have trouble pronouncing the name of the local First Nation peoples. So we stopped in a tourist store for instruction from a local.
Klondike Huichin.
Klondike Huichin.
On the morning's cruise, we saw a derelict steamship on the Yukon's left bank. So we're going to ride this ferry once more across the Yukon and go visit the grave site of those steamships.
Well, we've gone about a half a mile and still haven't found the exit down to the Yukon where all those ships are.
Soon, however, we found a path to the riverbank and the ships we were looking for. What a grand confusion of debris, moldering away, composting in the woods. Nothing about these wrecks invites me to climb around on them. So, unless it's preserved as an artifact, this is what happens to a riverboat when it outlives its usefulness. The last thing we did in Dawson, at a bright and sunny 11 o'clock at night, was to take a hired van to the top of Midnight Dome, which afforded us a wonderful vista of the surrounding country. The Midnight Dome tour concession provided us with a docent who gave a talk on local history and local lore.
So, what do we have here? This is the Yukon River. And the Yukon River, as you might know, will flow until it reaches Alaska, and then in Alaska will end up in the Bering Sea. So quite a long river. Yukon mean Great River in Han, and Alaska mean Great Land, if I'm not mistaken. When the gold rush started, too many men, not the same culture, so Chief Isaac, who was the chief back then, he decided, you know what, we're gonna move. So that was their fishing ground, so they didn't want it to go too far, so they moved next to the second island there, right on the side. So it used to be called Moosehide Village, and that's where they lived for a number of years. But then after a while, you know, when the real gold rush started, when there were over 30,000 men in Dawson, and everybody started working for the miners. So they did lose their culture, unfortunately. But Chief Isaac was such a wise man. Before that happened, he went up to Alaska, because in Alaska they are also Gwich'in, and they speak Han also, which is their language. So he went there, he taught everything he knew to his neighbor about the singing, the dancing, the drumming and everything. Just hoping that if one day they will lose their culture, they might come back here and teach them about their own culture. So and that's exactly what happened. In 1990, so not so long ago, a big congregation came down here and started teaching everything they knew about the Trondheim.
From our vantage point on Midnight Dome, we can look directly south across the Klondike to the place where Skookum Jim and George Carmack first discovered gold in 1896. In those days it was called
Rabbit Creek. Yeah, now they call it Bonanza Creek. And the El Dorado is up there also.
This is where the gold was discovered.
We hear a lot the El Dorado, and the El Dorado it's all there.
Joanne's talking with a paraglider.
It's happening tonight sometime, like on the 20th.
There'll be a big festival here tomorrow night, the 21st. It's 10:30 now. The sun doesn't go down until after midnight.
Well, it turns out
It only goes down for about 2 hours.
whatever you want, whenever you want.
This paraglider launched himself from Midnight Dome. They'll fly all night if the winds are right. I'll close with a paraglider. Dawson, a place where tourists gather, history echoes, and young people who serve the tourists enjoy pizza, craft beer, and paragliding. A fine place to be on Midsummer Night.